Hello guys, today we will be looking at how to make a main menu in Unreal. Let's press play here. We can see our game fades in nicely. We have these buttons here on the side that react when we hover over them. We can press the exit button and we get this pop-up window, and we can choose whether or not to close the game, or we can also just go back to the main menu. We have simple windows like the credits, and I won't be covering the options. That will be a future tutorial. But when we press play, we fade out nicely and open any level that we want. So let's see how we can create this in this video. Let's begin. So you can create this menu in any game template. We are in the third person game template here. So let's head up here on the top left, go file, new level, and just select the empty level. And we get this blank level here. In the content browser, let's just create a new folder. Let's just call it maps. And we will save our level into here and just hit this save icon at the top left. And let's select our maps folder and let's just call it LV for level, and let's call it main menu. Save that. So in the content folder, if you don't have a folder called widgets, create one. And we'll head into here and we'll create another folder. Let's call it the main menu. And right now, if we press play, since our level is blank and there is no floor, our character will just fall down. As you can see, our legs there dangling. So we need to change the game mode and remove the player character. So in widgets main menu folder, let's right click and go blueprint class. And let's just select the game mode base here. Let's call it GM for game mode and main menu. So if we go inside this new game mode that we created, and under here, the default pawn class, the previous one was using the third person character, but we will be using our own pawn that will display our main menu. So let's right click in here again, go blueprint class and go pawn. And let's just call it PP main menu pawn. And let's just go back to the GM main menu and default pawn class. Let's set that to our BP main menu pawn. Compile and save that. So now we can start creating the widget for the main menu. And let's start off by right clicking and let's search for widget and go widget blueprint and go user widget, WBP for widget blueprint, main menu. Let's double click this. So in the search bar up the top, let's drop a canvas panel, write that down here, and also a image, which will hold our background. So drag that into canvas panel, select the image and go up to anchors and let's make it full. And in the offsets here, just make sure they're zeroed. And right now I'm in ChatGPT and I'll ask it to generate a background image for me. You can go ahead and use whatever image you like. So I asked for a horror game concept art of a haunted house, and this is what I got. I thought it was a bit too dark, so I asked it to brighten it up and add a silhouette of a man, which turned out really cool. I'm gonna be using this for the background. So back in Unreal, in the widgets main menu folder, let's drag that image inside. Let's head back to the WBP main menu. And in the image, let's go under brush here. And in image, let's select our background. So I called it haunted house. So let's just compile and save that. Right now, if you press play, we still get the character falling. It's because we haven't changed the game mode yet. So under world settings, go into game mode override. And let's select our game mode, GM main menu here. So if you press play, you just get a completely blank screen. So right now it's using the main menu pawn. So let's double click this. And in the event graph, we can go ahead and start adding our widget. So we can delete those two nodes and we just need the event begin play. And from here, we need to create a widget. And in the class, let's select our WBP main menu. And let's just promote this to a variable in case we need to use it later on. Just call it the main menu UI. And let's just drag from here. Let's add this to the viewport. Add to viewport. So let's compile and save that and head back to the main menu now, and let's press play. And what we get is the image here, which is our widget. So this is me in the future because I forgot something. We have this bug here when we press play and click anywhere else but our buttons, our mouse disappears. So I know my main menu widget looks a bit different, but in your main menu widget, let's head over to graph. So search event construct. And what we want to do is get the player controller, and we want to set show mouse cursor and leave this ticked like that together. And from here, we want to also set the input mode to game and UI like that together. And in the in widget focus, we want to make a reference to ourself, which is the main menu widget. And so when we test this one out, we now can click anywhere and the mouse still stays on the screen and we have access to our buttons. So that's working. Now we'll just add the title and the buttons. So I'm on this other site called thefont.com, and in here we will search the font for our title and our buttons. So in the category, I want to use, let's say, typewriter. And in here, the more options drop-down menu, you want to make sure 100% free is on. In case we want to use it for commercial use. So this will be some free fonts we can use. I'm liking the look of this one, King Things typewriter. Yep, so this will do just fine, I think. So let's just download this. So back in Unreal, let's take the font we downloaded and drag that into the folder. And it's asking if you want to use the font face as the default, just press yes. So let's head back to our widget, our WBB main menu. And in the search palette, let's look for a scale box, drag that into the canvas panel. And let's also drop a vertical box and drag that into the scale box here. And select the scale box and you get this widget here where you can define the area where you want your title to appear. Now we'll choose the top right, some space here, and make sure these offsets are zeroed so we get the green box that will fit our title inside the anchor points. So let's add the text. Let's search here for text, drag the text into the vertical box and select the text now. And in here, let's change the font to the one we downloaded. So mine was called King Things. And let's come up with a name for our game. So I decided to call it Dead House. And I just want to move it slightly up. So the scale box, take the anchor points, bring this up a little bit, just so it's not touching this corner of the roof. And each time you move the anchors, make sure you reset the offsets back to 0 to move it back into place. And so the reason we added a vertical box is so we can add other things like text to it. So drag that into the vertical box. And for example, we want to make this known that it is a demo version. We can go ahead and do that. And let's just drop down the size. And let's center it here. So we have that option to add things to the title. You can also search for a border. Drag that in between the title and the demo text. And we can get a separation here. In the padding, you can control the size of this border. Let's just try 0.5. Yep, looks good to me. So now let's just compile and save that. And while you're in the widget, if you press the play button here, you'll get a pop-out window for your game. And since we have that scale box, we can resize this window. And you can see our title stays in the same space and also does not stretch. So now that we have the background image and the title, we can go ahead and start adding buttons to it now. So we need another scale box. So let's drag a scale box into the canvas panel, and this will house all our buttons. Let's take the anchor points and let's set it underneath the title here on the right side. Just like this. Make sure we zero out the offsets again. And let's search for a vertical box again and drag that into the scale box. And this box will house all our buttons. And make sure the alignments here are filled vertical and horizontal to fit the scale box. And you can go ahead, and I forgot in the title, you can also stretch these ones out to fill horizontal and vertical as well. So what some other people do is they add a button into this vertical box and they duplicate it multiple times like this. And for each one, they have play, options, exit, etc. But you'd have to make functions for each button individually. Instead, we will create one widget, which will act as our base button, and we will duplicate it to create multiple buttons. So let's head back to the content browser, and in the widgets main menu, let's right click and we will create a new widget. Widget blueprint, user widget. Let's call it WBP button main. And you can use this button for other menus like the pause menu and settings. But let's go ahead and set this up. So double click that. And inside here, let's search for a button. Drag that into here. And we will need a scale box. Drag that into the button. And we also need a text. And drag that into the scale box. Select the scale box here. And in the padding, let's just make that 0. And let's take the alignments and make sure it fills. So now we have text that will span the whole button. And let's remove the gray background from the button. Select the button, head over to background color, select that, and let's just take the alpha and make it 0. So we just have the text. Let's search for sound here. And on the hovered sound, let's use, so this should be a default engine sound. I'm going with VR click 2 for the hovered. And maybe the press sound will be the VR click 3. Yep. Let's test this out. So let's compile that and let's head back to the main menu. We can get rid of our buttons here now. And instead, we will use our WBP button. So search that up here and drag that into the vertical box. And we can just duplicate these to test it out. And right now they say the same thing. We will change that later. Let's just press play. And when we hover over these ones, we get that noise. And when we click it, we get the click sound. Let's go ahead and start changing the names. So back in the button widget, let's rename this text so we can find it easily. Let's just rename it to TX button text. And let's head over to the graph. And what we need is the pre-construct, so we can get rid of these for now. Let's also rename this button. Let's just rename the button to BT main button. And what we need to do is also select the text and let's expose this as a variable. So now back in the graph, we have this new variable, which will be the text button. We can drag that into here and we can search for set text. The content, set text, connect that to the pre-construct. And what we need is the text now. So we want to make this into a variable. Promote that to variable. Let's just call it text. And make sure instance editable is on and expose on spawn. Compile and save that. And so now, if you head back to the main menu, you can see that it's gone blank. And each button we select now, we search here for text, we get this text field. We can put something like play, and we see it appears there. This one can be options. We can have credits. The last one will be exits. Let's just add a default name for it now. So in the text, in the default value, in case you have not written anything, we'll just write default text. So when we create a new button main, it will show up as default text. Now we want to control the font as well. So back in the button main, so we can take our text button, let's just duplicate it here, drag off from there and set a font and connect that here. And in the in font info, We'll drag off and promote this to a variable. And let's just call it font. And so when you select this, compile it, show the default values here. And here now we can change our font. Let's use that King Things font. We can change the size and stuff. And let's also make it instance editable and expose on spawn. Compile that. So in the main menu, if you search font, we can see we have access to the font settings. So we can change individually what font we want and also control the size. So we can go ahead and change things like the size. You can check the skew amount. So you can go around and mess individually with the buttons. So we are missing the ability to change the color of the text. So back in the widget for the button, let's go ahead and copy this again. So take the text button, drag off and go color. And we want the set color in opacity under appearance. Connect that. And let's promote this one to a variable. And this one will be the, just say default color. And compile that. And let's change the default color. Let's just change it to white. So green needs to be 1. So we change the default color to white. Make this instance editable, expose on spawn. So now in the main menu, if we search default color, we can go ahead and also change the color of the button, just like that. And so I just want to push everything to the right so it's not centered. So I can select all the buttons. And in the horizontal alignment, I can push them to the right, just like so. So now if we press play, we can see we have our new buttons here with the correct text. And right now we don't have a visual indication of where our mouse is hovered. And so we will add this feature in. So head back to the button widget. And first off, we actually want to remove the sound. So select the button, search for sound, and let's just reset them back to none. Let's go back to the graph now. And in here with the main button selected, so we have this on hovered event down here. Let's press the add button here. And so when we hover it, we want to play that hover sound. So play sound 2D, and let's promote this sound to a variable. And let's call it hovered sound. Make sure it's instance editable, expose on spawn. And we can use again that VR click. Yep, so that will be our hovered sound. And what we want is also to change the text color and opacity. So in the default color variable, we can duplicate this and we can call it the hovered color. And let's compile that. And let's change the hovered color. Let's just leave it at white for now. So drag that into the graph. Let's get our text button here, this one. So from text button, let's drag off and let's set the color and opacity under appearance, this one. And let's connect that and connect the hovered color here. And so now when we compile that, let's head back to the main menu widgets. So we have this hovered color. So right now all of them will turn white. But for example, we want the start button to be green for some reason. We can test this out when we press play. You can see it turns green, but it doesn't go back. So let's fix that. So back in the button widget, let's select our BT main button here. And on unhovered, let's click the plus icon. And let's just copy paste this one from the hovered. So let's set our color instead of the hovered color. Let's get rid of that. Instead, we want the default color. We'll connect that into here, compile that and test it out quickly. So it's red, hovered goes green, and it goes back to the default color when we unhover. So one more thing we can add is change the scale of the button. So let's take our text button here and let's just set render scale. Let's connect that together. And from here, we can promote this one to a variable. And we'll just call it hovered scale. and make sure instance editable's on, expose on spawn. Compile that, and let's change our default values to something like 1.2 on X and Y. And on unhovered, let's just copy these again. And let's just disconnect the hovered scale, and let's just change the scale back to 1. Oops. So change the scale back to 1 when it's unhovered. And so let's test this out. Press play. You can see when we hover over the buttons, they get bigger, and then they go back to the original size after we unhover. So now that we have control over the variables, we can do things like changing the color individually. So I select these three. Let's just drop the value to 0.5. Make the hovered color to pure white still. Change the play button. Let's drop the value to 0.5 as well. And on the hovered, let's just make it a bright red color. So let's compile and test this out. So we still have our hovered sound. The buttons get bigger each time we hover it, and also change color. But if I click on it, nothing happens. We also are missing the clicked sound. So we will fix that and also add functions to when we click it. So in the button widget, let's select our main menu button here, and let's go on pressed. And what we want is the press sound. So play sound 2D. Let's promote this to a variable, and let's call it pressed sound, and make sure you make it instance editable, expose on spawn, compile that, and let's set our default one to that VR click 3. Let's just test that it works. So when I press it, we have that sound again. So after we click it, we can make it do different things. But since each button is using a base button, we want multiple functions. So instead, we need a dispatcher. So on the left side, let's add a event dispatch. Let's just call it pressed button dispatch. So drag this new dispatch, and let's call it here. Connect that together. Compile it. And when we head back to the main menu now, when we select this button and we head over to the graph menu, let's just get rid of this for now. And let's go ahead and rename these buttons here so we know which one we're dealing with. So in the designer, so the play button, let's just call it PT for button play. And we'll go ahead and rename these ones accordingly. Options. So now that we have it all named properly, head back to the graph. And we can start with the first one, which will be the play button. And here we have the events, the pressed button dispatch. Click the plus icon. And so if we hit play, we want it to open a level. So open level by object reference. And we can just select any level. But for now, we have that default map, which is the third person map. So let's test this out, compile it, press play. So these buttons don't do anything when we click it, but when we press this play button, it will open up this level here. So we can go ahead and, for example, the exit button in the events, let's add another dispatch, and we just simply want it to exit game. So drag off and go. So from here, let's search for quit game and compile that. So now we have a exit button, which closes the game. I forgot to add one thing. When we press play here, our mouse is still shown and we don't have control over the camera. So here, when we press play, we want to get the player controller. And from here, we just want to set input mode game only. Connect that here and make sure we connect it to the open level. So we press play. We have access to our camera and our mouse is no longer visible. So now we have these buttons that we can easily assign functions to. For example, here in this quit game function, we want to add another widget that will act like a warning before the player closes the game. So back in the widgets main menu folder, we will create a new widget. Search for widget blueprint, user widget, call it WBP exit options. So let's double click this one. We just want a canvas panel. We want a border. Make sure this border is filling up the whole screen. Let's make sure the offsets are all 0. And let's change the brush color. Let's change it to black. Let's drop down the opacity to say 0.5. And what we can do is also add a blur. Drag that into the canvas panel here. Change the anchors to full. Reset the offsets. And we want the Z order to be anything lower than 0. We can try -10. And let's take the background blur. Let's search for the blur strength. And let's try just 5. We need a scale box. Drag that into the canvas panel. Let's just center this for now. Reset this. Take the anchor points and we'll just something like this. Reset the offsets. Let's add a vertical box into the scale box. Just take the horizontal alignment and fill it left and right. Let's add a text. Add that into the vertical box. And we will put, "Are you sure you want to fit?" ? And in here, we will add a horizontal box. Drag that into the vertical box. And we will search for our buttons. So WBP button main. Drag that into the horizontal box. Let's duplicate them. They're side by side here. And let's change this one. Search for text. Alt text, let's change it to no. And on the right side, say yes. So this button will quit the game. Let's select these two and let's just center them. So fill and select these two to center them. Let's give a bit of padding from the top. Maybe try 10. And let's select this and then hovered. We can try red. And in the graph now, so let's just get rid of this and let's rename our buttons so we know which one we're dealing with. So this one is the BT no button. This one is the yes. So back in the graph, we can select the BTS and we have the same dispatcher here. And so this one will quit the game. So quit game. And if we select the button no, let's get another dispatcher. So this one will simply close this widget. So let's write remove from parent. And the target will be itself. So compile that. So back in our main menu widget, in the graph, in the exit dispatch, instead of quitting our game, we can create our widget, which will be the options to quit. So the exit options here. And we need to add this one to viewport, just like that. So let's compile and test this out. So instead of quitting our game, when we press this exit button, this new widget pops up with our options. And we can hit no to return back to this. And we can also quit the game by selecting yes. So you can see how easy it is to add functions to these buttons. And I can just do one more for a quick example. So let's just copy this exit options. Control C, Control V. Let's just name this one to credits. So WPP credits. Let's just open this up. Let's just change this text to something like created by me, Noinat Games. Then we can also change these buttons. Let's just get rid of the no. Let's change this one to return. Let's change the text here. Let's change it to return. And then in the graph, let's get rid of the dispatch for no. Oh, actually, let's take the remove from parent. Let's just control that and connect that to our new button dispatch, which is the return. We can head back to our main menu widgets and let's take our credits button. Again, let's add another button dispatch. And what we can do is just control copy from the exit button. We just need to change the class to credits and And just like that, we've created another function for another button. Let's press play in here. We have this credits now. So when we select it, we can see the credits window. Let's change the background for the credits just a little bit. Let's change the border, get rid of the padding, change the border color. Let's just go to 0.8, so slightly darker in the alpha. When we press play, we easily create another window and another function for this button. Got the exit, and we also got play. So right now you can make as much buttons as you want, and you can customize them by creating these event dispatchers. So we can add some background music. So in the main menu widget, let's go back to the graph. In the event construct, we can spawn a sound 2D. And I have my own music here. So I made this music folder. And this is from Ovani Sound, but you can go ahead and find your own sound. This one will be mine. So let's take this sound and let's put it into the spawn sound 2D. Search for my sound here. So let's promote this to a variable in case you want to play and stop it for any reason. Let's just call it background sound. And what I want is to fade it in. So let's try 5 seconds for the fade in duration. Compile that and press play. And you can see our audio fades in nicely now. And so what we want is to also fade in this screen. So in the animations tab, let's create a new animation. Let's just call it fade. Select this, and here let's press add and select your canvas panel. Select a new track, and we will search for render opacity. And in 0 seconds, let's change the opacity to 0. And our audio fades in at 5 seconds. So maybe we can try something a bit quicker at 3 seconds. So drag this to 3 and set the opacity back to 1. So when we press play here, we can see it slowly fades in. Maybe it's a bit too slow, but we can change that later on. So make sure we compile this, get it back to the graph. And now we have this animation tab here on the left. We can take our fade animation and we can play animation forward. And here we can also control the playback speed in case we wanted it to speed up. Let's just compile that and test it out. Press play. And we can see our screen fades in with the audio now. You can also slow it down. Let's say 0.5. That will take 6 seconds to fade in. But yeah, I liked it at say 1. Let's just leave it at the default 1. And one more thing we can add is when we press play, we can fade it out as well. So let's take our fade animation here, copy paste it down here and drag off, and let's search for play animation. And we want to change the play mode from forward to reverse. Connect that here after we open the level. And we also want to fade out the audio. And remember, we set the variable for our background sound here. So on the left side under components, we have our background sound. Let's drag that into here. And we can do fade out. We can try 3 seconds here as well. And actually, before we open the level, we need to drag that here. So we wait for the animation and the sound to fade out. So we need a delay node. And let's just that to 3. Connect that to the open level. And we also want to hide the mouse so we can't click on anything while this animation is playing. So from the construct, let's copy paste the set show mouse cursor. And let's put that just before the play animation. And make sure this thing is unticked. And get the player controller and connect that to the target. Let's compile and play that. And you can see when we press play, our mouse disappears, so we can't click on any buttons while the animation is playing. So I've gone ahead and added this bottom information here. So it's a scale box with a horizontal box and 2 text. On the right side, we have the build version numbers, and in the middle, we have the copyright information. And so just a quick tip, like want to move these ones around. If you select the scale box and hold Control, you can resize the anchor points, and the buttons and the content inside will move along with them. So I've gone ahead and moved the title and buttons towards the center a bit more. So press play. Yep, looks fine to me. And let's also test that when we resize the window, that our buttons are still able to be used. Yep. Just like that. So I think I've covered everything I wanted for this main menu. When we press play here, we got nice fade in the audio and background. I've changed the exit to be a bit more darker. So we have pop-up options. We can go back. We can easily create new windows. And we also have the play button, which starts our game. So hopefully you guys learned something and you're able to create your own main menu. Mess around with the fonts and placements, and hopefully you come up with something cool. And yep, I guess that's it. Thank you for watching. Bye.